So, is the brand new Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra good enough to replace one of these, a professional grade stills camera? I've headed up to London to test that question out. And as a small little side note, I'm feeling quite generous at the moment. I actually still have my Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. So if this video ends up getting over 5,000 likes, I will organize a giveaway for that phone to someone who likes and drops a comment on this video. So a quick word on software updates. So there's been a lot of chat about the S24 Ultra coming with its software updates, and apparently there are a few potential bugs on the camera experience on the S24. At the moment of recording this video, like the phone came out mid last week, I do not have a software update on this phone. I know that some people might have been getting them. For the time being, the experience is that I'm testing this with the software that I received on launch day, so we'll just have to see how it goes. So the camera I have here, along with the lens combination used during this video, come out to well over $5,000. So let's get started with the 200 megapixel sensor on the S24 Ultra. So I think what we'll do is kick off with the view of Tower Bridge here. Sadly, a bit of a kind of overcast day here in London, so we're not getting some nice beautiful views, but what we'll do is we'll stick on around about that 24mm, which is a pretty similar focal length to the S24 Ultra. And here we have the S24 Ultra, so we'll go over to that 1x. So first of all, let's shoot in the standard kind of 12 megapixel mode. So this is pixel binning down from that 200 megapixel sensor down to a 12 megapixel shot. And let's go ahead across to the 200 megapixel mode, take another shot there.
So here is the full resolution 200 megapixel photo. Obviously at that kind of resolution, you're not actually being able to see a ton, but let's put those photos side by side. So on the right hand side is the A7 IV, and on the left hand side is the S24 Ultra at 200 megapixels. The biggest difference here clearly is the white balance and the difference in handling of the white balance color. But like on the surface, there's not a ton of differences in terms of detail. I would say the Sony's a little bit smoother, slightly less sharp, but overall this is pretty close.
In terms of the kind of camera settings that we're using, I'm going to keep everything pretty much on auto for this video. So obviously the experience that you're getting on the S24 Ultra is about ease of use when you're shooting on a smartphone. So we are going to shoot RAW on the Sony, and we'll obviously give those an edit so that things kind of look in line, but I'm not going to mess with a ton of manual settings on either device.
A little bit more of a quickfire around here. So the S24 images are first, and then the Sony images are secondaries. Again, the biggest difference here definitely is actually the white balance. The Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra is continually balancing towards green hues, which is kind of interesting. It was a fairly kind of white day in terms of overcast clouds, but I just shouldn't think this should be affecting things massively. This is definitely a pretty bad trait so far, and we'll have to see whether Samsung actually updates that slightly down the road. This one perhaps here, the most obvious example, you've got the Sony A7 IV shot here, and that definitely hued more towards the purples, and then the Samsung looking just super green.
One of the most significant changes this year with the S24 Ultra is the change of the telephoto lenses. So this year we're seeing a dramatic change on the Ultra. The optical 10x zoom has been removed and changed for an optical 5x zoom with a 50 megapixel count. So this is a significant change for the line, and it does mean that on the 10x button at the bottom when you're shooting and trying to get a 10x focal length, you're going to be getting a digital crop. So let's see how it performs.
So far, I actually think this is the biggest win in terms of the camera, because the images out of this 5x look really, really good. It's really good to see performance for this type of thing actually living up to the marketing, because they've obviously made that change, decreasing the 10x to the 5x optically. I do think that 5x is a more popular focal length, and it actually just means that seemingly we are getting better images. Like there's not a ton of difference when we're kind of comparing these landscape shots.
So there's a boat moving across here, so I'm going to take a full 50 megapixel 5x zoom, but I'm going to switch over to the 12 megapixel modes, and let's try and play around with some of the digital crop 10x. So let's have a look. I mean, this is on the surface looking pretty good right now, but let's take one. Let's take a couple, and then of course we're going to shoot at roughly 240mm. Certainly looking like we're getting more detail, of course, on the Sony, but let's see how the S24 Ultra holds up.
For this one here, I decided to just zoom in kind of to fill the frame and kind of align the photos so you can get as best idea as possible in terms of the resolution differences and the kind of colors and optical performance of these two cameras. And I think the 5x and this 10x digital crop is actually better than the previous iteration of the 10x zoom. So I actually think this is a really, really good change this year from Samsung.
So on the 10x mode, you absolutely get kind of a crunch. So let's take this image here. I'm just going to say that again. So let's take a snap. We'll pull that photo up in the gallery. It takes a little second to process, and then you get a significant kind of snap of processing on the S24 Ultra. But I will say, like, it's looking pretty good considering it's a digital crop. I would say that's a similar level of performance of last year. So it's seemingly like we've got a 5x optical performance and then really, really good quality digital crop for that 10x mode. So every year with their phones, Samsung's edge detection gets better. So it's going to be interesting to see how the portrait mode performs. I've seen some kind of sneak peeks on Twitter, and the edge detection actually looks really, really good this year. So it's going to be an interesting test. So I've got Tate helping me film this video, as you can see, and we'll take a couple of portrait mode snaps just to start with. Now 1x is an interesting thing with portrait mode because we can actually see how much blur you end up getting on the professional camera. And at 24mm, you're actually not going to get a ton of blur. And smartphones actually end up giving you a far more dramatic amount of blur than you would normally get at 24mm, which is always a bit of a giveaway for me. One way around that is to actually shoot in like a 3x or on the Samsung, a 5x telephoto shot in portrait mode.
So this is actually the 3x mode here, but you can see the portrait, the Sony obviously on the left here and the Samsung on the right. But again, the performance is pretty decent. Tate's got obviously amazing hair, and the Samsung actually does a fairly good job at detecting the edges there. And I think things look pretty good.
One of the main advantages of shooting with a more professional camera is you obviously have an unlimited amount of variable lenses that you can put on your camera. So I've just switched out, since we're talking about portrait mode, to a slightly more specific portrait lens. So this is an 85mm f1.8, meaning we're going to get a very shallow depth of field in our image. We're going to get a lot of blur in the background of our shot. So if I head back here, I'm stopped right down to f1.8. I'm going to shoot a quick snap, and you can see just how blurry the background of the image is. And on a Samsung or on the S24 Ultra, obviously this is kind of across all phones, but on the S24 Ultra, you're not going to be able to achieve quite the same look in terms of natural depth of field, and the phone, of course, relies on software to produce the same result.
And then, of course, we had to test it with the brand new 5X just to see what this looks like side by side. So again, this is compared to the 85mm portrait lens that I talked about earlier, but you can see just the kind of level of compression that you get in terms of portrait mode. And obviously, one big advantage about portrait mode is that you can change the blur after the fact of actually shooting it, so it's not actually kind of baked into the image, which of course it is in a normal camera.
So something that has plagued Samsung phones historically is their shutter lag performance. This is something which I brought up in my 1 year later with the S23 Ultra review video I did a few weeks ago. The shutter lag performance was just not very good on that phone. So I think let's just actually take this out, and I'm just going to snap a bunch of photos. So let's go ahead and tap. And that definitely seems like it's a far more responsive shutter than last year, which is like really good in terms of performance. Something we can do as well though is we can actually swipe sideways and take a burst of photos as well. So you're getting kind of a whole variety of options, but at the same time, shutter lag performance definitely seems improved versus last year's iteration of phone. Another challenge that Samsung phones have actually had over the years is motion capture. So motion performance, like taking a fast photo of a moving subject. Lots of people report problems with like pets and children taking photos of both those subjects. So we got the next best thing. We got some cyclists going past behind me. So we're going to try and take a shot on a couple of the lenses on the S24 Ultra just to see whether the performance has actually been improved over last year. And then of course, one huge advantage of a more professional camera is that motion capture is very, very easy. That's why people use big, expensive cameras for sports photography with things that are moving unbelievably quickly.
I do think so far from this very quick test that motion capture seemingly looks a little bit better on this phone, which is really good news. The worst performance for the S23 Ultra was in low light situations, and motion capture in low light was really pretty bad with that phone. I will of course test this thoroughly in my full camera review for this phone. Just for interest, you can see that here are the A7 IV shots of the kind of same thing, and you can see that you do get much more of an impression of the motion, but the Samsung shots certainly weren't blurry, so you know, this is a decent performance. And then of course I didn't want to disappoint you guys, I did include some video. I actually am thinking of doing like a full video comparison though between my Sony a7S III, which is my professional or my kind of main focus video camera, but this is the a7 IV footage, so let me know with a like and a comment whether you'd like to see that one. But for now I just thought I'd just throw in this video clip just so you could kind of get an idea in terms of video performance how things differed. Here's that video side by side as well, so you can see the video on the left hand side, the Samsung, the video on the right hand side, the Sony a7 IV. It's relatively close. I do think, again, the kind of thing that gives it away really is the softness of the a7 IV footage, which is just a much more premium look. I'd love to know what you guys think about the S24 performance down below in the comments. Stay tuned for more videos on this phone locked to the channel.